One of our supporters said, "The people of Maine deserve a progressive for this race. Do not shove a neoliberal centrist or corporate candidate down our throats." And now, out of the 3,700 Mainers who signed up to run as delegates, you are one of 500 people who will be in charge of choosing the next Democratic nominee this weekend. And so, do you think that the people of Maine are getting what the supporters have asked for? Welcome back to a very special episode of Concepts of a Pod, as our old friend Liam has some very exciting news for us about a new role he's in.
Well, thank you guys for having me. First off, I am pleased and excited to say that I'm officially a delegate to the Maine convention this weekend. And honestly, I wasn't expecting it. But now that I am a candidate, I have had to resign from my position at Blue Anchor Project for transparency and to make sure that everything is all above board.
Yeah, and we are so happy to have you on Concepts of a Pod in your new capacity as a delegate to the Maine convention, where we can directly ask you all the questions our supporters have about the process that'll be sweeping the Democratic Party this weekend.
Perfect. Throw them at me.
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about the process, so I'm excited to learn about how all of this works because we haven't had something like this happen in a while, I don't think.
No,
This is a pure West Wing. Like, if you think of the West Wing convention episode, this is exactly what it's going to be like.
It's funny, that's what I said to my dad when I was telling him about the interview we were doing. But to kick this off first, before we get into it, I would like to read out one quote from one of our new Digital Now focus group supporters, which for anyone who is new to Concepts of a Pod, the new Digital Now focus group is the nation's largest digital focus group of grassroots Democratic donors. Think the people who click on those text messages and actually give that $5, $10, $20 that keeps our grassroots movement free of the corporate influence that takes over the right and unfortunately some parts of the center left. But one of our supporters said, "The people of Maine deserve a progressive for this race. Do not shove a neoliberal centrist or corporate candidate down our throats." And that quote...
Very strong, very strong.
Yes, that was a quote from July 9th, shortly after Graham Platner dropped out, Graham Platner had to go, we all agree, because he lied to everybody about his background and his impropriety and just general grossness. But that being said, the people of Maine did overwhelmingly vote for a progressive. And now, out of the 3,700 Mainers who signed up to run as delegates, you are one of 500 people who will be in charge of choosing the next Democratic nominee this weekend. And so I got to ask you, do you think that the people of Maine are getting what the supporters have asked for?
Yes, I can tell you very full-heartedly, it was a very intense caucus. They say it's a delegate selection committee. No, all intents and purposes, it's a caucus. And we had, for my county alone, which it's very interesting, where I live, it is a lot of retirees. It is, as I know, of the oldest county in the entire country age-wise.
Oh, wow.
And my county is the oldest in the entire state, so technically the entire country. And they're very active. I love them. They're absolutely adorable.
Old people are always the most active in politics.
Yeah.
My favorite is all the grandmothers. They give me all their costume jewelry, so I can't complain. So of course I wore one of my little brooches that they gave me there. And
Good.
It was so interesting. They were really excited to have young people involved. And there was 130 candidates. And I was very grateful to be able to be chosen as one of the 15 from my county alone. And it was really neat. People were like coming up to me, asking me questions, but a lot of them was exactly what that quote said. And they were all asking, how are you going to decide? What are you going to decide? How are you going to do it? And it was a lot of listening, and I loved hearing everybody's concerns. And I just have to say it was really gratifying. And it was fun to see democracy in action, because normally in Maine it's a primary. And so, the candidates go around chatting in town halls and such, but it's normally not as hands-on. This is the first time that I've ever actually seen a process in the state of Maine this hands-on, ironically, in such a short and limited time frame. Because there are a lot of people who hadn't been involved in the Democratic Party for years coming in and wanting to be involved. And the best part was a lot of the regulars who don't really do much in the Democratic Party apparatus in the state did not get voted in. And it was a lot of new
Good.
people, not just where I am, but down in Cumberland County, everywhere. And the candidates were there too, which is shocking. I showed up and there's Troy Jackson, Narev Shah, there's Shanna Bellows, there's Jordan Wood, there's Dan Clibben, the brewery guy, and others. And you had all the national media there in a high school on the coast of Maine. That's new for Maine, let's put it that way.
It feels
But it
like
was
that's
really
how
neat to
politics are
see.
supposed to be, though, with everybody
Yes.
there listening to what's going on, the candidates showing up to talk to people. Like this feels like this is how things are supposed to be.
And
Is the
I'm
world
hoping the
healing?
adage, as Maine goes the nation, applies here, because this should be happening everywhere. This is exactly how politics used to be run and how it should be run, in my opinion.
Is the world healing?
I think
Hope
so.
so.
One lobster at a time, as they say.
It sounds like this weekend's going to be like even more interesting now that, you've had the time to talk with everybody and you are a delegate now. I would love to learn a little more, like, where is this happening and how long is this supposed to take? Before we get into the details about who you're
Yeah.
supporting and stuff, tell us a little bit more about the actual process that's supposed to happen this weekend.
Well, it's brand new. Let's put it that way. They
All right, well, there we
created
go.
it in 3 days. I used to be part of the state committee when I was in college. I was part of both the state committee and the executive committee of the Maine Dems, and I was their token young person. And what basically was is I helped create some of these bylaws. And I can tell you right now that nothing like this was in the bylaws. And of course, by state law, it is to the party. So they came up on this. I don't know how they did it. They must have just gone back to an old caucus style that they've had and adapted it. But before the caucus, they had 2 weeks in essence to get everything set up, legally okayed by lawyers and all of that. They had to find venues that were big enough. They had to create all the signs. They had to create the bylaws. They had to create rules. They basically set up an entire electronic voting system that we all used, which, to be honest, I actually really liked. It was really easy to use. And they even had a helpline set up for people to call. They even allowed people to vote from home. You had to be pre-registered, and they had to have verify your voter registration as a Democrat as of the primary, so that no Republicans could just pop in unexpectedly.
Wow.
And so it was really a fascinating process. So now that we've gotten through the 2 days of caucuses, it was kind of left up to the candidates how they wanted to approach it. And so now we have the convention, and they're still figuring that out, to be honest. I haven't gotten any instructions of how really the convention is going to work per se, like exactly how we're going to vote, all the scheduling and stuff. They have a procedure set up for it. And so I'm hoping I can hear about that in the next couple of days. A lot of the candidates have dropped out now in favor of endorsing Troy Jackson. That's kind of where we're at this point. So once the nominee gets chosen, then it is full steam ahead to be able to defeat Collins. But I've never seen so much civic activism and engagement in Maine ever in the political realm in my over decade of experience in this game.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And as you said, most of the delegates we've seen similar reporting to pretty much across the country now have coalesced around Troy Jackson. I know I actually saw you were quoted in Politico supporting him, but do you want to tell us a little bit more about why you're supporting Troy Jackson for Senate as a delegate?
Yes, I'm supporting Troy Jackson because I've known him since I started politics. It was funny. I was shadowing when got involved in college Dems, and I was, kind of getting my feet in the water and all of this. I ended up calling up my state senator, Eloise Vitelli, and she let me shadow her for a couple times. And so she was, I think, the minority whip at the time and the majority whip the next time. And she let me come into the Democratic caucus, kind of the meeting they have every day. They start before they go out and do the voting and stuff. And it was really neat. And I just happened to be wearing, I think, the straightest outfit I could have worn, which is a purple vest with a little shark thing on it. And Troy liked it. So he said, "I like your vest. What's your name?" And that's how I ended up meeting Troy. And somehow I got his phone number. I don't know how I totally don't really remember exactly how I got it, but I did. And, what a nice guy. And what struck me about Troy is he's real compared to every politician I've ever met. For the level he was at, there was no fake filter that they would put on like everybody else that there is there at a lot in Maine Dems and the political structure in the state of Maine. And it stuck with me. And that was my first kind of experience in really wanting to be able to, have a taste of what is a good politician, what is a good way of doing politics. And that's why I ended up really supporting Troy, is because he is real, but then also because he has the unique ability to defeat Susan Collins that nobody else ever has. And that is because they are from the same county, Rustic County, otherwise colloquially named in the state, the county. That is the biggest county east of the Mississippi and is the most Republican and the most rural. And they both come from a logging background. Her family ran a mill and ran a hardware store, and he's a logger himself. And so a lot of the attacks that she is going to try and she has successfully used against other candidates is because they're all from the South. I mean, to put it in perspective, people in Holton, Maine at the end of 95, Bangor is a far distance for them. Augusta is pushing it. They've never been to Portland and don't even think about them going to Boston. So
Jordan, maybe I'll put a
and
map up and so we can see where all this. I
you
don't
need
know
to
a
put
lot
a
about
map
Maine
up.
geography,
I will.
but
I will.
I didn't realize that they were from the same place and have such a similar like familial background that makes this all the more interesting and is going to make it a whole heck of a lot harder for Susan Collins.
And they're both from near the Canadian border. So whenever she says anything about like, oh, I don't know about terrorists, they're like, girl, yes, you do. You have look out your back window. You know, as Sarah Palin, I can see Russia from my house. She literally can see Canada. So
You stole that joke. I
of
was just about to make that joke.
Wait, could Sarah Palin actually see Russia from her door?
No, I think
Probably.
she's.
I don't know. I know that like Russia and Alaska, like when you go all the way out, that I know they're closer, but I don't know how close they actually
I
are.
don't think so. I'm not going to fact check a statement that put us on the political trajectory we are today. But I will say, though, Liam, I also saw in that Politico piece, you actually heard directly from Jackson not long after Platner dropped out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I became a delegate, and then this past Wednesday, Thursday, I was making a sandwich for lunch, and next thing I know, Troy called me. And, you know, I was shocked. You know, it's like to take time out of the front runner's time, and, you know, candidate time is money, and asking me to support him. And it really meant a lot because he wanted to know how I was doing. He wanted to know how he could be a good senator, how he could be a good candidate, and what he should do. And, you know, I told him what people have been telling me, and I told the truth. And he was okay with it. He wasn't angry that I was telling the truth to him, and he actually agreed. And, you know, because I really wanted Troy to run to begin with because of his qualities and because he had the ability to beat Susan better than anybody else. He decided to run for governor. So I joked with him that I wanted him to run. And, you know, now that fate has aligned that he is, and he chuckled at that one. And he was like, yeah, you know, you're right. So he's real. And what really sold it on me was his debate performance, is the way he talked to me on the phone and the way he talked to me in that caucus meeting years ago and the way he was on camera. Exactly the same person. And I don't like to say I have a really good BS radar, but I do have a very good BS radar, and I don't get anything from him about that.
I do have to ask, though, and I know there have been, unfortunately, as with every new candidate in the limelight, some stories swirling around, especially in the light of the unfortunate failure of everyone in Maine to vet Graham Platner.
Don't get me started on the idiocy about that one. He's a horrible person. I never should have run.
No.
Well, we know that now. And as you've said, and a lot of other people we've seen online say that Troy wears his heart on his sleeve and that he's a very real person. He's very relatable. We want to make sure that we do our due diligence, and did want to bring up the water bottle incident. There was a Washington Post article that came out not too long ago about that. And, you know, just want to know what you think about that. Are you worried? We published a podcast episode, Democrats' Platner Problem, in early June, and 66% of our supporters still liked him. We had to tell them the truth about the fact that he ended up not being a good person. And although, you know, we don't have the ability to vet everybody as much as we wish we could, I think it seems there's a lot more, you know, vetting happening this time. And just want to know how you feel about like the whole situation and how you think it could relate back to his chances and such. Because it does sound like he's a very, very genuine person.
Yeah. And Liam, before you answer, I just want to give some background context on the story to anyone who hasn't heard. The quick version of it, I believe, is that in a heated argument with the Speaker of the House, who is a woman in Maine, it was a heated argument, I believe, about a red flag law that he wanted passed, and she didn't for some reason, that he threw a plastic water bottle. Accounts vary whether it was at her or on the ground in frustration, but either way, a very large man and a show of physical dominance sense in a heated argument situation that women are now online saying may make them feel uncomfortable, but also maybe some establishment sniping. Who knows? Liam, you're the one on the ground, so would love to get your input here.
Well, I can say, tying back to the responsibility of vetting, as delegates, it is our responsibility, flat out, first and foremost. And, leading into the convention, everybody needs to do their due diligence and really make sure that they vote with not only their brain, but with their heart and what their gut is telling them. From my personal experience, I have not witnessed him doing that sort of thing. And I mean, flat out, if anybody's doing these actions, that is not okay. You should not and shall never intimidate anybody to try to get to your point. From my experience, in the caucuses and from my discussions in the state house and around the state of Maine, I haven't gotten that sense. I have never really seen him act that way. But from what I can tell from the accounts and from what I've known from my own research and conversations, is that he gets very passionate about topics, and that, it was the former Speaker of the House of Maine, and she's former for a reason. It's because she didn't really do a good job as Speaker, and she was a prodigy of Sarah Gideon, and we all know Sarah Gideon is the most ineffective politician that has ever crossed the state of Maine and stole $14 million, and in essence, she kept it and never gave it back to the voters. So that is a key context to keep in mind. And people who are from that Gideon realm don't do anything unless there is something in it for them. And the red flag law, the other key context to keep in mind is that was after the Lewiston mass shooting, which was the first mass shooting to ever happen in the state of Maine. And it is the deadliest shooting to ever occur. And it rattled the state of Maine. So people were very passionate about wanting to make a difference and stop this ever from happening again, because it never should have happened. So Troy, understandably, was frustrated. And from what I know, he got very annoyed at that. And I'm not positive he threw anything or not. If he did, he shouldn't have. But I can also understand why he got frustrated, because people were dying. And people shouldn't die, and you shouldn't let maniacs have access to weapons that can kill people so easily. It's such common sense. But we have such a strong, independently annoying Trumpian streak in the backbone of our country. And also, we just have bad people in power that use strategy to their own advantage. And I think having seen how exposed Maine has become, that's the best way to describe it, to having such an international spotlight focused on our state that we haven't had really ever. The irony is Susan Collins not giving up power has made her even more of a poignant symbol, like the bat symbol in the sky, really. So it's a lot of opportunists seeing their moment to shine and, make their voice heard. That's the best way I can describe it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we saw also, just for context for people, that Jackson did apologize for the incident. And most people, just like you talked about, they say, this is a quote from a CNN article. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. It can be good. It can be bad. He's a normal guy in that regard, and he cares passionately and he acts passionately, which I do think is very important this day and age with all of the bad politicians we have. But on the flip side of that, in the same article, someone who's worked closely with Jackson stressed that it's no longer acceptable to treat people with disdain, disregard, and disrespect, and that he's got a lot to learn. And if he does become the Democratic candidate, that he needs to address how he's going to be a leader, not just for the bros, but for all of us. And this was an excerpt from a CNN article, but it's good to hear that he's someone who genuinely really seems to care. And, nobody's perfect, but I really appreciate learning and hearing about just how passionate he is about everything. We need more people like that who care a lot more about what's going on. And I'm glad that he's using this opportunity of, all of the attention he's getting, all the attention that Maine is getting, to show people how passionate he is about everything that he's doing, and that he wants this, and that he's going to do this for the people and not just be another Susan Collins or be a Sarah Gideon or, any other bad Maine politician that you want to rattle off.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Liam, but from everything you've told me about this guy, it sounds like if anyone ever went up to him and actually said, hey, you made me feel uncomfortable there, he would be like, oh man, really? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
Yes, that is exactly how he would be. But then again, you also have to keep in mind the fact that these are serious allegations. And I think as a Democratic Party, And, as people ourselves, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we cannot fall into the same trap that we did with Platner. And I think that is something to heavily keep in mind going forward a lot of the time. I also think something to keep in mind is the general context of everything, in that Troy Jackson is the number one best candidate to defeat Susan Collins. So you have to keep in mind, what are the Republicans trying to do to paint somebody who's a good guy to defeat, well, in essence, a puppet of evil, I guess is the best way I can describe Susan Collins at this point.
The woman who's the reason that women don't have abortion rights, you mean?
Yeah,
the woman who, there's
reasons.
a reason that a lot of women don't have a lot of rights, but it's tough to become a leader. It's, just from being in a group to a leader. And it seems like Jackson's taking this really seriously and trying to make sure that he's learning how to be a good leader, because that's not something that's easy to do, especially when you're thrown into the situation or you all of a sudden have that opportunity. So I'm glad to see that he seems like he's really working towards that, because we need a lot better leaders in our party. And a lot of the leaders who are currently there got there through, I'll say, gross negligence or gross misconduct, and I'll leave it at that. And we need new people. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, gross negligence, gross misconduct,
gross incompetence,
and $2.5 million to out-of-state consultants in the case of Graham Platner. But let's be clear about Graham Platner, too, because one more thing, I'm actually glad you mentioned him in this context, because we do have to keep the context into consideration, in that I have seen not many, but some takes that are somehow comparing this water bottle incident to anything that Graham Platner did, and I have yet to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, regardless of anything anyone said about passionate debates, heated discussions, maybe a bit of physical feeling of intimidation, I haven't seen anything even remotely close to allegations of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, or domestic violence of any kind, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, okay, just want to make that one clear, because quite frankly, not only does kind of conflating those things hurt people who are innocent of those things, it actually helps people who are guilty of those things downplay them, because if everything is on the same plane, then you can excuse one by comparing to another. But on that note, yeah, I think we are excited to see what comes next from the Maine nominating convention this weekend. I hate to cite a betting market here because they shouldn't be a thing, but the betting markets do think that we have a better chance than in a long time to get Susan Collins out of the Senate. And I won't like the markets, but I will take that. Feels like people are feeling there's a good chance. But I think, was it Peltola and Alaska's team who said, don't bet on the race, donate to make sure it happens? So go make sure that Troy Jackson beats Susan Collins in November. And Liam's so excited to hear what's next for you, both as a delegate and whether you work with the campaign on a formal or informal level. It'll be great to hear how you get involved. But before we go, I think you mentioned that you resigned your position with the Blue Anchor Project. And for anyone who doesn't know, that the Blue Anchor Project, unlike New Digital Now, is a super PAC. New Digital Now exists as a hard side PAC, which means that we can only take small dollar donations, but we can work directly with campaigns. Meanwhile, a super PAC cannot coordinate directly with candidates. Obviously, Liam's getting phone calls from Troy Jackson now, so he should not be the chairman of a super PAC anymore.
And, we strategically designed Blue Anchor to be a super PAC to keep us immune from Trump. And however he was going to try to attack Democratic organizations, that's why I set us up that way. And that means I'm no longer a part of the Blue Anchor Project. Doesn't mean I still don't support the mission, because the mission is vital in making sure that people are heard, whether people want to hear it or not in the political world. So, my next steps, I honestly have no idea after the convention. I would love to be able to work with the Troy campaign and be able to help make sure he is the next U.S. Senator. I also am gleefully excited to be able to take down Susan Collins and make sure that she can never win any election ever again. And, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. And before we go, I just want to take a minute to look back at some of the great work we all did with the No Kings movement. And not sure if you guys know, but there actually was a No Kings event over the past weekend. Unfortunately,
There was?
Yeah, it was a fraction of the coalition, I don't think it was the whole group, got together, because I got an email about it as a partner on the digital side. I got the email about it 2 weeks prior, and right away I sent out a survey to our supporters being like, do you guys know about this? And 87% of our supporters said they didn't know that the event was happening. One person told us that they had a lot of trouble trying to figure out where the protests would be near me, and they gave up. And it's just, I don't know, after breaking the record for the largest mass protest in American history 3 times over, which was an incredible feat. We brought in so many new supporters, have so many quotes from so many people telling us how enthusiastic they were about getting together, but at the same time how dejected they've been because they've been asked to donate to things like the No Kings Act, and then we bring people together for these protests, but then it sometimes feels like, and Liam, correct me if I'm wrong, is another one of the partner organizations, but that it doesn't feel like we have the follow-up we need to divert the energy from these protests into something good. And God, I mean,
Exactly. I mean, the vast majority of it was sucked up by Mothership. Whatever happens, it's something that I want to make sure can continue forward. And I think, we need to ensure that there are no kings. And it's a great, I got a lot of people engaged when we needed it to have them engaged, but it's gotten to the point that it is so corrupt that it is no longer working nor functional. And we need to ensure that there is a different way to harness that energy. And, I don't want to give Platner any credibility. The only thing I will say, we had a bad person in charge of a very good movement, and that movement was started because of No Kings. And we're at this point that we need a new torchbearer. And, never in my life did I think I'd be voting on the new torchbearer to make sure that we take back our democracy from crooks and, from a wannabe king. And that's the world we live in now, folks.
Here's the thing, though. We don't need one torchbearer. We need a lot of torchbearers. And I look at it like you look at the Olympic relay, which I don't know if you guys know how it works. Obviously, we all see the one person light the torch at the end of the opening ceremony, but I don't know if you know the flame is actually carried all around the world. And my aunt actually ran with the torch once in 2002. And she did a small portion of it, and she still has the torch that she ran with, but it is a lot of people carrying those torches. And that flame is carried all around the world, and it doesn't make it to the big goblet at the opening ceremony without all of those people. And in this case, those people are all of our supporters who are responding now to us. We've had over 80,000 comments since we've started this whole thing now. And
I love it.
One person told us just yesterday that they've been at 4 protests, nothing changes. I've donated more money than I can afford and nothing changes. I'm just tired of campaigning and paying since 2015. And I mean, 2015 is since I was in high school. And I've been trying to fix it for the last couple years now since I got into this game. And full disclosure, I actually worked for Mothership Strategies straight out of college. And
you didn't know. We forgive you.
Also, I will say back in 2020, they were doing some good work for some good candidates, and it was a philosophy that was the only way to beat Trump and his people. And I mean, we can talk about the No Kings pack they launched recently, but I was long gone by then. But I will not comment on a former employer, because I will say I met some good people there, but
let the audience make their own decision on that one.
Yeah. The point is that clearly the supporters want something different. They want to be heard. And as for the No Kings movement, we asked what they wanted next, because clearly the protests are getting oversaturated. And those who wanted more protests said they wanted one big No Kings Day to cap things off right before the midterms. But more than that, people just want to see us investing directly in the elections. And we see that with the trends in how donors are giving more to candidates than ever before, which is good. However, they are only giving to the Senate candidates. If you see the Act Blue top charts now, it's great to see that the scam packs are not there as much as usual. However, we now have a new problem, which is I'd call it a K-shaped candidate economy, where the big time Senate candidates are raising a lot of money. Meanwhile, the down ballot candidates who really could flip a seat on a fraction of that don't get the time of day. And that is the middle ground New Digital Now is working on fixing. And Liam, I know you are now on the ground trying to flip the Senate for us, which is also important. And we will be at the center of making all that happen. And none of it would be possible without our supporters who make all of this run with your comments and, yes, your donations too, because we won't lie to you about where they're going, but we will tell you that this is a 100% grassroots movement. And if you want your voices heard, the best way to do it is with us, and we can't do it without you.
Yeah, thank you for all of the comments you've given us and will continue to give us. This movement is led by you, and we are doing our best to make sure that your voices are heard and out there. Yeah, I've said this every time. Thank you. Can't say thank you enough. And we're so excited to get to still continue to do all of this with all of you and have you along for the ride with us.
Yeah. And Liam, thank you for joining us and
Yes,
for
thank
giving
you,
us
Liam.
an incredible overview of what's to come this weekend. And we look forward to following along with all of you.
And I'll make sure to trot out in the woods behind me every now and then to keep you guys updated.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.